Hi all, welcome as you come in. Obviously give it a few minutes for people to sign on. Good numbers early again, so pretty impressive lineup we have for you tonight. We have plenty of polls, plenty of questions for the viewers today. If you haven't been here before, then in the middle down the bottom on the Q&A button, you can ask questions throughout. I'll endeavour to get as many of those answered as possible. As it's tonight, we're based on standing a stallion, which is a new topic. It would be great if you get as many questions as we could answered from yourselves, as well as the questions that I have here that everyone emailed through. So we'll get started in one more minute. I'll just let everyone come in. All right, we'll make a start. So my name is Corey Smith and welcome to episode 4 of series 2 of Horse Racing Tell Me How. We have a pretty impressive guest list with us tonight. We have Henry Field from Newgate. Welcome, Henry.
G'day, Corey. How are you?
Good, thank you. And I've got a little bit up there on the screen of your background with Coolmore and a few other things, but if you just wanted to touch on your experience so far, and I guess, how did you become a leader in the world of standing stallions?
Yeah, well, I started as a young fellow working on my family's property and also with my grandparents who were into horses. And growing up through school, I went and worked for Gay Waterhouse for all the way through school. And then finishing school, I was lucky enough to get on the Darley Flying Start course, which then catapulted me to a great, fantastic job at Coolmore. After spending 5 or 6 years at Coolmore, I leased my own block of land and set up my own operation. And then as the years went on, with the support of Gavin Murphy and Tom Ryan of SF Bloodstock, as well as Matthew Samblom, we partnered together and built Newgate to what it is today.
Yeah, and it's pretty impressive, the rise, and we'll go into that further throughout. We also have tonight James Price back for your second time. James, just like Simon Vivian, becoming a bit of a stalwart of the webinars. Welcome back.
Thank you, Corey, and good on you for running them and teaching people about the industry.
So a little bit more down your alley, this one on obviously the stallions. So we'll get right into it. The first part here is let's talk about some of those amazing sires you have standing there. So we'll start with yourself, Henry. Look at that list. A lot of young talent there, but also a couple of absolute superstars in Deep Field in there. And if you look down the bottom there, Written Tycoon, obviously, James, a couple of superstars there. But if you want to touch base on how things are going, Henry, in COVID times.
Yeah, well, things are thankfully in our industry have been not too badly disrupted by COVID. It's the broodmare market held up pretty well, the Gold Coast, and the yearling markets have been holding up reasonably well. The last sale, the Magic Millions National sale, was quite decent. So yeah, thankfully things have held up pretty well, Corey, which has been great. Lucky in New South Wales, I feel, for all you guys in Victoria that are locked in solitary confinement. But no, we're very thankful up here, and you know that the world's gone on as normal pretty well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And James, pretty impressive roster that yourselves have together there, including a mainstay in Foxwedge who actually stood at Newgate previously, I believe.
Yeah, that's right, Corey. We were lucky enough that Eddie Hirsch, who purchased Foxwedge off his previous partners, wanted us to stand him in Victoria. And yeah, since arriving with us in January last year, he's been phenomenal. His record with black type winners, and also just every Saturday he's got another winner. So we're delighted to have added him to our roster. And I think, as Henry touched on with COVID, I think the racing and breeding industry is incredibly resilient. It's extraordinary. We always expect it to take dips and have troughs and that sort of thing, but it's incredibly resilient, and there's so much strength across the market. Look, in Victoria, it's been a bit slower to get going from COVID. Obviously, we're in stage 4 again, and numbers haven't been great. But I think the numbers are better down here, and I think once people sort of start to see the light, things get rolling again. We will bounce back as we usually do. So looking forward to the season, which begins tomorrow, and then obviously into 2021 as we go back to the sales ring.
Yeah, and I thought that standing a stallion is a suitable topic based on, we're all stuck in COVID times at the moment and you need to think on your feet. But obviously standing a stallion in that type of business in general is being creative and trying to make sure that you're always ahead of the market. So I guess we'll go to you, Henry. What do you look for when trying to acquire a stallion or find a stallion? What's the first thing that you're looking for?
Well, I think the first thing you look for, Corey, is you look back and see in Australia over the last 10, 20 years, what has been the blueprint for success? What's been the blueprint for stallions that have been successful in this country? And so that's the first thing we do. So, fast Australian horses with legitimate Group 1 talent, with the right pedigrees, are all the sort of stallions that as a generalisation, that's of horses that cut the mustard in this country. Like if you look at this year's or the last year's sire table, the top 10 sires were all Australian sires. They're all Australian colonial stallions. They all had plenty of speed. They all had the right pedigree. So that's where we start, and we've moulded our roster around that general belief.
Yeah, and I guess there are so many stud farms around the world that are looking for the same thing. So what ways are there to acquire a stallion? So obviously the obvious one is to identify one and then go and purchase it. But at what stage do you show an interest? Is it early in their career? Is it once they're a proven Group 1 winner? And what's involved in acquiring a stallion? How many different ways are there?
Yeah, great question, Corey. So I suppose we do it a few different ways. We buy a group of colts every year at the yearling sales, and that's one thing that we do in partnership with China Horse Club, SF Bloodstock, Matthew Sandblom, and Sir Owen Glenn, and a wonderful team, a host of good partners. And we've had a lot of success with that. We were lucky enough to buy into Capitalist with James Harron when he was a yearling and won the Slipper, and we bought into Russian Revolution with China Horse Club and and Sir Owen Glenn, and he was good enough to win an Oakley Plate in the Galaxy. Cosmic Force, our new boy this year, who was favourite in the Golden Slipper and a hugely talented horse. We bought into him as a yearling. So that's one thing we've done very successfully, and it's been a great core to bring stallions onto our roster. And then I suppose the other way you do it is you buy them as the finished product, horses that are racing, that have either somewhat through their racing career or have completed their racing career. And at every stage you play, the price goes up, of course. But the further you go in the line, the less risk you take. So a horse, like Cosmic Force, for example, who was a horse we bought as a yearling. He was a horse that, had he won a Group 1, probably would have been syndicated for well in excess of $10 million. As it turned out, the balls didn't fall his way, like his own side, Deep Field, and he didn't win a Group 1, so he was syndicated at a much smaller number than that. So, there are, I suppose, the key ways to acquire stallions, but the main thing is just finding a horse you really believe in.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting that you mentioned buying them as yearlings, because I watched a webinar where Tom Ryan mentioned that as a group, which I assume is the same group, you purchased around 25 yearlings, and of those 25 yearlings from that draft, 4 of them went on to be stallion prospects. So that's an incredible eye for talent. I've got a question here from Chaz Preble, who says, Henry, I heard it was you who pushed for the purchase of Justify on your first visit to Keeneland yearling sales. Is that true, and how did that unfold?
Yeah, Justify was a yearling that was an awesome yearling, so muscular, powerful, and as a horse I love very much, as did as did Tom Ryan, as did Michael Wallace from the China Horse Club. Magnificent horse. We were buying colts together in partnership with Wingstar, and to be fair to Elliot Walden, who's the CEO of Wingstar and a hell of a good judge, he took the mantle and bid 500,000, and it was I think I admired very much from Elliot, because he was a horse that Elliot loved very much, and he had a few little X-ray issues, and it took a fair set of balls to buy that horse, and as it turned out, he was one of the all-time great racehorses the world's ever seen, and was sold to Coolmore for a very high undisclosed sum. But he was a horse that certainly I really felt looked all speed. In America, the Holy Grail is to run 1.25 miles, but that was a horse that could run. He was like an Australian sprinter that could run 2,000 meters. That's a rare animal.
Yeah, and really interesting, the idea of having partnerships. So James, how important are relationships and most of our panelists in previous webinars have spoken about, in their part of the industry, relationships are everything. It seems the same in this industry, I imagine.
Oh, no doubt, Corey. I think number one for relationships is, as Henry was talking about, the acquisition of stallions. It's such an incredibly competitive industry to try and acquire these stallions to one, purchase them and have them stand at your place, but then two, to be successful. So I think you need the relationships and need the partnerships to obviously have deeper pockets to be purchasing these stallions, because the competition is so strong. So the more stallions, or the more colts you can get your hands on, and obviously Henry has sort of different avenues to acquire them, and it's something that we do at Woodside just to a lesser extent. But you've got to have those different avenues to try and acquire these stallions, because they are hard to come by, and they're quite expensive.
Yeah, I've just popped the poll up on the screen to basically see which of the current sires in both of the yards are most impressive to our viewers, so then we can sort of tailor some of our questions along the way. But I guess another one for Henry, how does the price structure work? When do you decide on how much you will stand a stallion for, and what makes up the reasoning for that?
Well, ideally you want to stand stallions so that the demand for the stallion outweighs the supply. So stand the horse at a certain fee where you know that you're going to be in a position to have some level of quality control over the book of mares the horse covers, and also making it a price where breeders can actually do well out of the horse. So a horse like Brutal, for example, really outstanding racehorse, won the Doncaster in less starts than any other horse in history, and was by a champion sire in a row. He ticks a lot of boxes. We still had also 25,000 plus GST, which allows us to make sure the horse has an oversupply of mares at that price, which means that we can try and foster the best quality mares into the horse as possible, and a large quantity of mares. A horse like Tessort, he's a very interesting horse to sort, because he's actually, as we know, he didn't win a stakes race, but he won the Golden Gift, which is now a stakes race, in a race record time, and demolished a good field of colts. But we priced that horse with a breeding right structure attached, so people that had the right quality mare, that bred to the horse for 2 years, would earn themselves a breeding right. And so realistically, when you're trying to get horses off the ground, you've got to get them a quality of mare. If you don't get them a quality of mare, it makes the task so much harder. And so there's sort of two examples on pricing. One, a less expensive horse with a breeding right structure attached, which allows us to try and incentivize people to breed good mares to that horse into sort. And a horse like Brutal, where he probably could have stood for 30 or 35,000, but we priced him at 25, so he could pick and choose the mares a bit. we're very mindful of pricing them in order to get the best quality mares to them. It's so important.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So, poll there. So, Brutal is the Newgate newcomer that has the most interest from our audience. Russian Revolution has just edged out Total Stardom for the sires that are most looking for a successful career once they start hitting the sales ring fairly soon. And then which of the first season stars will capture the hearts? We have Capitalist, so which won pretty resoundingly. So unfortunately, James Cable Bay isn't there, so I might pick one up fairly cheap. But just on that, what we did, James, for this week for our audience is we sent out the usual brief. This week's brief was, one of the questions was, what do they believe is a stallion making race? A lot of people have said the Coolmore, the Blue Diamond, the Golden Slipper, the Newmarket Handicap, Everest. So what makes it a stallion making race, I guess, is the question.
I don't know. I suppose what makes it a stallion making race is history. What we've seen works, and I think as Henry spoke about, you look at history and look at what works, and that's clearly it's the Golden Slipper at Rosehill. That's clearly the stallion making race. You go back to the past winners, and it's just a time honoured. You actually even go back into those horses that run in the top 5 in the Golden Slipper. They're the best horses of their generation. Often they go on to win stakes races, whilst it's not the Golden Slipper. They've run in the Golden Slipper, run well in it. They've had their shining light at stakes level and been successful stallions as well. I think you look at something like, I think Henry will probably know this off the top of his head, but something like Snitzel, I think he ran second in the Slipper to Stratum, both of which were successful stallions. So definitely the Slipper. As a 3-year-old race, we look at the Coolmore, I would suggest is probably the sire making race there, but certainly far and away for me is the Golden Slipper. It's the pinnacle of 2-year-old racing, and as we know, 2-year-old racing is the pinnacle of Australian racing. It's what we all desire, and with us standing Written Tycoon or at Arrowfield this year, we're us as well are fingers crossed for a horse like Capitalist and his 2-year-olds, because if Capitalist can hit the ground running with early runners, it just bodes well for Henry, but also us standing the stallion. So we wish him all the best.
Yeah, I guess a question that I had here from one of the participants actually, James, was the Category C component of the VOBIS scheme. So it works. So if you're served by a stallion standing in another state, but it's raised in Victoria, they're still eligible. But the New South Wales equivalent actually has to be from a stallion in New South Wales. Is that a hindrance to get the top commercial stallions in Victoria, that rule?
No, I don't think so. I don't think people don't decide where they want to stand a stallion based on VOBIS and Bobs. Bobs is a far simpler system than VOBIS. Bobs is just purely the stallion where it stands, and that's basically it. Whereas Category C, I've actually got to get the percentages, but I think Category C, which is the mare and the foal, have to reside in Victoria for a period of 6 months or more, and it has to be owned by a Victorian. So, but I think the percentage of Category C eligible yearlings or eligible foals is very, very small, very minute. So I don't think, to be honest, I don't think VOBIS or Category C has any influence where people stand stallions, and therefore where people what stallions they send their mares to.
Yeah, and Henry, I guess this part is now on marketing, which is probably, I would imagine, one of the most important parts of the industry. I noticed that both Woodside Park and Newgate, if you go to their websites, have quite impressive graphics, and I've put some of those up on the screen now. But how important is the marketing of a stallion to its success?
Yeah, marketing's very, very important. I think that the most important thing is the horse himself, and I don't think you can market a horse that's like, if a horse is on the nose with the marketplace, it doesn't matter how good your marketing is, it won't move the needle. I think in this day and age, it's such a competitive marketplace that we're in, that unless you market your stallions well and properly, you got no chance. Like all the major farms have, very powerful marketing departments. We're fortunate we have Leanna Packard, who's our marketing manager, is excellent, and she works with PM Advertising in America. But I think you have to be good at marketing, or you won't survive. And pretty much the farms that are thriving in the marketplace at the moment are all well able to promote their product in a clear and concise way, which I think is very important.
Yep.
I think
I've got a question here, James, from Anthony Nola, who's a New Zealander, and they tend to go for a more classic type of horse and love a Derby winner. Why is it that we have such a preference for fast 2-year-olds in Australia?
Why is it? I'm not sure. It's just how we're
fashionable.
It's fashionable. I don't know, Henry. You might be able to answer that question. It's to me, it is what it is.
Well, the question was, why fast 2-year-olds? Why is
so popular here? Yeah, whereas in New Zealand they like a more.
Well, I think the climate's a big thing. I think that the hot climate, is conducive to producing earlier maturing horses. It doesn't matter if you look at Florida and the United States, or you look at even Queensland and Australia, where a lot of 2-year-olds are bred and come out of. But I think our climate's far more conducive to producing early maturing horses. And I think that with the advent of the Golden Slipper 50 years ago, to have the richest juvenile race in the world in this country, I think are all things that move the needle in terms of making people motivated to get 2-year-olds more of a priority when they're racing horses. I mean, the beauty of 2-year-olds, of course, is that you go to the yearling sales and you can buy a yearling rich enough, or a winning Rupert, or an early maturing type yearling, and you can win a race quickly and recoup a lot of your prize money back in this country, and that's very appealing as well. You can recoup a lot of your purchase price with the wonderful prize money structure we have in Australia. So I would say that the programming, the Golden Slipper being a big part, and our climate are two reasons why 2-year-old racing is far more prevalent in Australia than probably any other country in the world.
Yeah, and I guess a question that I've been wondering is, how does somebody become the next Henry Field in terms of how do they get involved, but also how would somebody, just say there's a syndicate of people that have $100,000, for example, all the people that are following this webinar could be that type of person. They come to you. How would they go about investing in a stallion? So you see syndicates that buy horses at sales all the time, but,
sure.
but you don't often hear about syndicates in stallion. But obviously that must happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of stallions in this market, in the last 5-10 years, have actually been syndicated. Pretty much every big farm, or every farm, I'd say, when they're buying or standing a stallion, looks to bring partners in. So certainly at Newgate, we syndicate nearly all of our stallions. At Arrowfield, they syndicate many stallions. At Widden, they syndicate most of their stallions. In Coolmore, never used to syndicate their stallions. Now they're bringing partners into their stallions. They certainly did with the SCSCS and others. And interesting, even Godolphin, who in my lifetime have never syndicated stallions, are now bringing partners into their horses via lifetime breeding rights. They did that with Microphone this year, and we actually bought a number of them, Newgate partners, and they did it with a horse last year too. So I think that bringing partners in or syndicating a stallion does two things. One is it spreads your risk. So from our point of view, we like to keep the majority of our horses, maybe 50%, but it allows a diverse group of breeders to come into the stallions with us. And these horses are very expensive, so it helps us pay for the horses. Equally, for a breeder, if they come into a stallion and he's the next high-level stallion, they're essentially getting a piece of the upside. So, I mean, for example, a horse like Deep Field, he was syndicated at like around $200,000 a share, and shares have traded him recently at around $500,000, and everyone's been able to use him for 5 or 6 years on the way through. So anybody that bought a share in that horse in the first year has done incredibly well, as would be the case with Written Tycoon when Woodside acquired that horse and a syndicate which owns him too. So syndication's a wonderful way for breeders to get equity ownership and some long-term upside in a stallion prospect. And the thing is that I suppose is that it's probably not a standalone investment type structure, but if you're a breeder and you're going to use a horse anyway, well, you should seriously consider buying a share in that stallion if you're a believer in the horse.
And I guess that would be the question for a lot of people. How would they go about that? Okay, so for example, you hear a lot about lifetime breeding rights and things like that now. Are they something that the market are now purchasing with the view of actually on-selling themselves, and is that sort of thing being more prevalent in the market? And how does it work, I guess, for people
I'll tell you how it works. So you've got two types of structures. You have syndicates, which means that you're an equity owner in the horse. So a lot of the syndicates are 40 or 50 share syndicates. So say you go into a 40 share syndicate, you'll own 2.5% of that stallion essentially. And with that, you might have one nomination for life, plus a pro rata split of any income that stallion makes. With a breeding right, you're buying one breed into that horse every year for the rest of his life. So you can breed one mare, you don't own any equity in the horse, but you can breed a mare to the horse every year for the rest of his life. And those commodities, which are essentially breeding rights or shares, are tradable commodities that can be bought and sold between breeders and are frequently bought and sold. In fact, in North America, they're sold far more than they are here. One of the things that the stallion masters, I find in Australia, have not wanted to do, many of them, is let them be sold at auction, stallion shares or breeding rights. But I think it's a wonderful thing to allow stallion shares to be sold at auction, especially in a digital age where you can have digital auctions every fortnight, because it creates liquidity in the marketplace. And the more liquidity in the marketplace, the more opportunity there is for people to buy in and out of shares and stallions, which, anytime you have liquidity in a marketplace, it's a good and healthy thing. So, yeah, I mean, if someone was a breeder and wanted to get involved in a stallion, typically what I'd advise is when we buy a new stallion or any farm buys a new stallion that they feel a farm they want to be involved with, ring up and say, I'm interested in buying, and being involved in that particular stallion. And in many cases, the opportunity to buy a share or a breeding right will be there for them.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, I think, and something that people wouldn't always understand unless they're in the industry. James, looking at the left-hand side there, obviously we have the logos of the Woodside Park sires there. Marketing a brand is quite important. So I guess for you, something I've heard you say many times is that Woodside has never stood a failed stallion. I guess, how important are sire tables and all of these types of things, or is it all about really, does that horse improve the stock?
Yeah, I think you made that comment about Woodside. Yeah, so since Mark Rosethorn took over Woodside Park from his father, he's made a few significant investments, but yet he has not had a failed stallion. So he invested in Written Tycoon 3 months after he took over for Woodside Park. He then invested in Zoostar. We don't own him anymore, but we had an integral role in his success. And now our 4 boys on our roster, Cable Bay, Rich Enough, Toast and Stardom. So you look at, I think this sort of all ties into the marketing of the horse. It's not just the horse themselves. It's a whole picture. It's the stud that stands them. Maybe it's beginner's luck from someone like Mark Rosethorn, but it's the whole picture. And you go back to this sort of idea of marketing of the stallion. And you talk of syndicates. I think syndicates, I mean, they're clearly the way forward because it sort of spreads your risk. But to have 40 or 50 shares in a stallion, that's 40 or 50 people promoting your one horse. So you can sort of, bleat on yourself as a stud manager how good your horse is. But if you've got 40 or 50 other people out there who are invested in your horse, it makes it a little bit easier when they're out there singing the praises of, a young horse like Tessort or, your extreme choices and that sort of thing. In terms of branding, I mean, these icon logos, they've been around well before my time at Woodside Park, but I think it's like any marketing of anything out there, not just in the racing industry. You've got to have brand awareness. You've got to have something that people recognise, whether that's our logos or our colouring or that sort of thing. You've got to try and somehow have some sort of brand recognition. So we like to think we go some way in succeeding at that.
Yeah, and Henry, just one final thing. I noticed that so Tom Ryan said something in the webinar I watched about sacrificing top mares to new stallions to give them a chance. If you could expand on that, that would be fantastic, just to explain how that might work. And I also noticed that you buy a lot of your own sire's progeny at sales. And what's the reason behind that? The average person out there might wonder how that benefits you if you're spending money on them, the horses you've bred.
Sure, two separate questions.
Yep.
I'm not sure I love the word sacrificing, but we'll often breed a mare that we've. Well, for example, we bought a mare in America for $1.5 million, a mare called My Conquistadora, who was a top class grade 1 winning 2-year-old in America. And we bought her and thought to tap it. We sold the tappet out of it for like $900,000. Brought the mare to Australia, and we brought her to Russian Revolution straight off the plane because we want to give those young stallions a great opportunity. We're breeding mare like Absolute Glam to Brutal, a Group 1 winner. We're breeding a number of every year. We'll launch these young horses with 20, 30 young of our own mares, and we try and get a very good quality broodmare band. So we're launching the stallions to do that. And maybe all those many of the mares that would go to our young stallions would be worthy of going to any stallion in the land, but we feel that by breeding them to our unproven horses, it gives them a wonderful opportunity, which in turn will pay us big dividends in the long term. That being said, Newgate, we sold yearlings by our first season size this year, like Capitalists up to $750, Extreme Choices for a lot of money. We sold Winning Roops up to $400,000. So we get good returns as well when we sell those yearlings out of those good mares. As far as us going to the market and buying progeny of our own stallions, we buy a number of weanlings or yearlings in the market by our young stallions. Jim Kerry, our stud manager, one of the best pinhookers in the game, he'd always be there trying to buy yearlings weanlings, by our stallions, because we want to support the marketplace. Those that breed to our stallions and pay the money, we want to be there. You produce a good weanling in the market, and in many cases we're bidding on it. As far as in our racing program, we're not afraid to go and buy a lovely yearling by one of our own stallions that's unproven. I mean, Cosmic Force was from the first crop of Deep Field. It was $170,000 yearling that was worth many millions when he retired. We've got a Capitalist colt that we bought for $500,000 at the Magic Millions in his first crop this year that looks like it's got a heap of talent that's in the Snowden stable. So they're the reasons why we go and support progeny of our stallions, but that's why it's so important to only start with stallions in which you believe, and which you believe have great long-term credentials. Otherwise, you'll be burning a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm just about to launch go on, James.
No, I was just going to add to that. I mean, putting aside Woodside stallions, I mean, we've got 60-odd broodmares, and we're going to send probably 20 outside. If I'm just looking at it from purely broodmare perspective, there's no doubt in our decision making that we look at, say, the Newgate Stallions, and we know that if we send a mare there, we know that that progeny that's produced will have a chance of Henry and his partners potentially buying that. Or if we put a good mare in foal to one of his stallions and we want to sell that mare, we know that, you know, Henry and his partners may be there to support. So that definitely goes into our decision making. So, you know, I mean, I would suggest that, you know, sacrifice is certainly not the right word, because obviously there's clever matings and, you know, matchups that are done. But it's certainly, you know, yes, you might send a Group 1 mare to a proven stallion, but I think the upside to sending it to a young first season, second season unproven horse, there's probably plenty of upside that obviously Henry would see, and that's, you know, why he continues to do it.
Yeah, and just for yourself there, James, someone once told me that sires are, it's quite similar to racing. So you have different grades. So the price points are quite often, you know, Group 1 might be your I Am Invincibles, down towards, you know, the price point of Deep Field type thing. And then, you know, you have different grades, and as they succeed, they move up the grades. So I guess I've launched a poll there. So second season sires, which of them will dominate again, Super 1 or Rich Enough? They were 7th and 8th in the first season and only looking stronger as they go. Which of the third season sires will dominate? Obviously, Deep Field's one of those. Which stallion? So then we get down to which stallion offers the best value. So I guess if you have mares to mate, you're looking at different price points depending on what you can afford. So is that something that, when setting the prices, comes into your thought process, as which other stallions you're competing against in those price brackets? And is it like grades? Is it the same as racing in that sense?
It's probably, yeah, it is, but I think it's most definitely where you want to price yourself in the market compared to the other stallions that are going to stud. Certainly first season, you know, our last horse to go to stud was Toast and Stardom, and yeah, he stood first season at 17,000 plus GST, and yeah, we really had to price him to probably not so much what was first season in the Hunter Valley, but was probably more sort of what were his competitors locally in Victoria. So probably not so much. I mean, Henry spoke about Brutal standing at 25 plus GST. I mean, we're sending a mare to him, and I think he's great value. So he's a Group 1 winner. So he probably is entitled to stand for more. It probably just depends on what your business model is, whether you've got a, say, a Godolphin, they sort of price their horses higher because their stallions don't have as big a book as you know, other farms' books. So it's all dependent on how many numbers you want to get to the horse. And yeah, so the grade of race the horse won it's taken into consideration, but it's not the be and end all.
Yeah, and I'm just looking through now at so I'll end that poll there. The results there we have is Rich Enough has won the second season sires, will dominate again, but it was 60-40, so good, some support on both sides there. Deep Field by a country mile, 85% of people can see that. See Deep Field succeeding, which I think already he is succeeding pretty well. I think, Henry, you must be pretty pleased with Deep Field, I imagine.
Yeah, Deep Field's going so well. You know, he's a horse, didn't win a Group 1 race, but we believed had that talent, had that necessary talent to be a genuine Group 1 horse. And he's worked his way up from 20,000 now up to 50,000 per covering. And he's leading sire by, of his generation, by winners, stakes horses. You take the Everest out, and he's the leading sire by prize money of his generation. He's the leading sire in Hong Kong of his generation. He's ticking, you know, the boxes that need to be ticked for a young sire that looks like he's going to go all the way. But you know, he's also an outcross, which is very helpful in the marketplace too.
Yeah, and James, if you could just expand on, so I'll just go through these results here. So which stallions were the best value for their price? And I think everyone following the webinar obviously didn't want to upset either of you, so they went for Fox Wedge. That's one. That one, and
he's a horse close to my heart, Fox Wedge, and he's certainly a wonderfully well priced proven stallion down there at Woodside.
And then, surprisingly, Tazort has won it's a lot of spread votes in the crystal ball for the newbies, but Tazort has come in as the best value. So what I will do, James, I know that you love Cable Bay, so I'll let you spruik Cable Bay if you can.
Oh, look, I was a fan of Cable Bay before I joined Woodside. I just thought the exercise that we're trying to do with Cable Bay and turn a stallion into having an elite runner to stakes winner record, and to have the mares handpicked, and if your mare's not good enough, you get told no, which has put a few noses out of joint over the few years. But it's been a long burn. It's been 2017, which he first stood, and now we're sort of on the brink of seeing how good his stock might be, having put the mares through this matrix, I guess. So we'll be kings, or we'll have egg on our face.
I can't wait. I can't wait to watch, actually, because I really admired how you played the card there with Cable Bay, with Rick Jamison's involvement. Who all of us that are in the game would respect Rick as the most bright man when it comes to matings, and it was a really interesting structure, how you handpicked the mares, and I can't wait to see the outcome of that. And he's doing a pretty good job as a Stallion in the North. So with the combination of that and the fact you manage his books very, very tightly, it'll be fascinating to see how he goes.
And another one that I like a lot is Flying Artie, which hasn't got too many votes either, Henry. So before we came on off air, James sort of said Cable Bay was his sleeper, and you said Flying Artie was your sleeper. What if you could expand on Flying Artie for us?
Flying Artie's the most, he was the most talented racehorse. He big, gangly, deep girthed, later maturing type horse that was good enough to all but win a Blue Diamond. Ran a phenomenal placing in a Golden behind Capitalist, and came back at 3 to win. I think as good a Coolmore has been assembled in a decade. He was a serious racehorse. Also, he had 7 starts, and for whatever reason, he's been really hard work for us to get off the ground, because he's covered lovely books of mares. We've supported him heavily, as have all the shareholders, but he hasn't had the same sex appeal as some other young stallions that have retired to stud in recent years. But anytime you have a horse with that much talent, that's throwing big, raw, athletic-looking yearlings and 2-year-olds, he's got to be a great chance. And we're getting actually terrific feedback from a lot of people saying, geez, we actually really like our Flying Artie. It doesn't surprise me. He was a hell of a racehorse, and he's priced at only $15,000 plus GST. So he's not many Coolmore winners and slipper horses, diamond horses are standing at that fee.
Yeah, I'd agree with it. Flying Artie will be very interesting, both of those sires, once they start hitting the track here. Cable Bay, of course, in the Northern Hemisphere, doing okay, but be great to see them down here. And James, just on the left-hand side there, maintaining clients. So obviously delivering with success. So I guess this is more on maintaining success. So you've got Deep and Written Tycoon there, which have already had success on the track. How do you maintain it and keep the momentum?
I think as Henry put it earlier in the webinar, it's really the market. I mean, you can tell people till you're blue in the face how good a stallion is, but if you are on the nose, or if you're a stallion on the nose, it is very hard to sort of to alter that. So look, measurements for stallions delivering success. It's for us in Victoria. It's hard to have a new stallion every year. I think what we try and focus on is having a horse that we really believe in, that we think can be a genuine success, a horse with, as a 2-year-old with speed that can go on as a 3, that has a turn of foot, that raced on our hard tracks, that, that beat our best. I think, you've got to have the majority of those boxes ticked. So I mean, Written Tycoon left. I mean, we can beat our chest as much as we like, but I mean, it's an awful lot of luck, really, to have Written Tycoon from, where he was. You could send 3 mares for $3,000 each, and now he got up to last year standing for $100,000. So look, you can put all the measurements and everything in as much money as possible, but goodness me, you need a lot of luck, And I mean, I've been very fortunate. I haven't sort of put all my money on the table like someone like Henry. I've stepped into the role at Woodside Park, a mature farm with really good stallions. But someone like Henry's built up from nothing, and you have to. I listen to every word Henry says and commend him on all his efforts and guts and risk, and what he's done to build Newgate to where it is. It's Corey, you said you wanted me to join this webinar. I was more looking forward just to listen to what Henry had to say, rather than
That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. The one thing I would say about the stallion business, or any business in our industry, probably any, but the people you surround yourself with are what will dictate, I think, your success. And it's a cliche thing to say, but one thing I've always done from day one is whatever amount we could afford to get the best people we could, we've done that. And when you surround yourself with people that are intelligent but also have integrity, it takes you a long way. And it's been a big part of our success, I think. But thank you for your kind words, James. I appreciate it.
I just on that, Henry, the covering limits in the USA, do you think they'll come in here, and how do you think that affects the stallion business?
I don't think they will come in here. I'm a believer in free markets. It's interesting. It's funny. I was only talking to someone the other day about it, but when we buy a stallion, all of us have a pretty similar spreadsheet where we say over 3 or 4 years, breeding a certain number of mares, it works out the value of the horse. Well, whenever you start bidding on stallions, your number on your spreadsheet keeps getting more and more. You start at 140 and end up at 180 to try and justify the purchase price of a new stallion. But I think free markets are important, and I think that we shouldn't be dictated to by the racing administrators how many mares that we can breed to our stallions. They're our stallions, and we should be able to manage them as we see fit.
Yep, I've got the questions up there now, James. I might whip through a few. So probably a bad question to ask yourself because you haven't had a failed one yet. But what does happen to a stallion that doesn't make it a stud? So if one comes along and doesn't make it, what happens?
Oh, you just try and in most cases you probably sell that horse to a market that probably treats him more kindly. So if, let's say, a failed stallion in Victoria, I don't want to name another state where they might go to, but you just try and pick a market where they'll have more appeal than they have in Victoria.
And I've got another question here. Henry, you might answer this one for us. So with the speed on speed and the return on investment in the US and Australia, basically in a nutshell, the question is, do you see us standing stallions that can breed Cox Plate and cut-winning horses with our preference for 2-year-old quick horses?
Yeah, I hope so. I think there's definitely room for diversity, and it's not to say that there's not a place for shuttle stallions. It's just the probability of a shuttle stallion making the grade here is far less than an Australian stallion. But yeah, I think there'll always be a place to breed certainly Cox Plate horses, and unfortunately, the European imports, when it comes to the Cups type horses, are hard to beat. I'm not sure how we counter that, but I think my view is that we're well known and we're famous in Australia for breeding the world's fastest horses, and certainly from our point of view, we're trying to stick to our strengths, so to speak.
Yeah, another question here from Peter Stanley. What's the best stallion man mating system program? I guess that's more down to, the way it's bred.
James, you can go for this one, mate.
Oh, I don't know, go to my mobile phone and call Rick Jamison.
Yeah, exactly.
But oh look,
Call Ronnie Gilbert or Rick Jamison.
Yeah, that's it. Oh look, I think there's so many. There's any system. I think they've all got their merits. Whether it's G1 Goldmine, whether it's Trunix, whether it's Enix, I can't remember them all anymore. But look, I think, in all fairness, they've all got merit, but I think you can always find a breeding program that can support your theories or what you want to support. So, as a general rule, I don't think one's better than the other. No.
And people should never underestimate. Just breed like a stockman. Breed the right mare, the right stallion that fits physically, and a common sensual genetic mating would be my view of it. I strongly don't think there's any magic mating on paper. It's a sum of all the parts.
Yeah, and are there any sires in New Zealand? And so Anthony Nola again. So obviously very proud of his heritage over there. Are there any sires in New Zealand that you really like at the moment that would fit in the Australian market? O'Reilly, is that over there?
Yeah, O'Reilly used to stand there at Waikato Stud and was a very successful sire. There's a couple of stations over there very interesting. A horse like Almanzor at Cambridge by Wood & Bassett, who was a very high-class middle distance European horse. And Super Seth at Waikato is a horse that won a Guineas, and I think he would be a commercial sire wherever he stood. They're probably two young stallions in New Zealand that I'm watching closely.
The stallion I'm looking forward to seeing his stock is probably Tavachi, seeing what he does, young son of High Chaparral. So it'll be interesting to see what he does on the track with his stock.
Yeah, and for this question for both of you, and it's obviously not making a play at somebody else's stallion, but if you could choose any stallion that's not standing with you at the moment to stand with you, which would it be worldwide?
Well, I think I'm Invincible or Schnitzel in Australia, and I would probably. It's a good question. In America, I suppose who's the best? I would pick probably Quality Road in America, and I'd probably pick Galileo in Europe, but Dubawi. But I'm Invincible and Schnitzel, terrific young, terrific stallions in Australia, and they're probably the benchmark, wouldn't you say, James? Ridden Tycoon's a horse that I really admire, not just because James stands him or is involved with him, but he's a horse that's worked his way up from nowhere to somewhere. And statistically, he keeps improving from winners to runners, station winners to runners. Like most stages don't improve like him, even though his mare quality's gone up. But yeah, Ridden Tycoon is a horse that we've supported heavily every year, and stand a couple of his sons.
And
I'd add a horse like sort of probably in Europe, a younger horse, probably Kingman. I think he's doing an exceptional job. Just as a younger horse that could take a mantle down the track.
Yep.
I love a Dubawi. So how do you think Darn Hot will go, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, he interesting. Night of Thunder he's a hell of a young sire, and you could argue that Too Darn Hot's has better credentials than him. So, as I said before, with those shuttle stallions, you never know who's going to be who and what's going to be what. It's a bit of a lottery, but certainly a son of Dubawi with that horse's racing talent's got to be, and pedigree's got to be a horse taken very seriously. In fact, of the young shuttle size, he'd be the one that I would. Of the young shuttle size, he'd be the one that I'd probably have on top.
Yeah, that's good. My research is coming up trumps at the moment. So, and then Nick Hamilton's just asking James, when it comes to looking at pedigrees of potential stallions, is there any work done that involves looking at their genetic profile to determine whether they may be suitable? But I'd take that question a little bit further, is how important is pedigree as opposed to the physical type and performance of the horse?
I think pedigree is important so much. So it's more who the stallions buy. So, I think standing stallion, I mean, yes, with Cable Bay is different because we've gone back into the pedigree, 6, 7, and 8 generations to try and find things that will work with this broodmare herd. But pedigree in standing a stallion probably doesn't go much further back than the first two generations. You know, it's by I'm Invincible, or it's by Written Tycoon or Schnitzel, rather than, you know, fourth generation, it's out of a such and such mare sort of thing. I think I mean, they all play a role, pedigree, but I think race performance, you have to have performed at stakes level, no doubt. Which is different to what it used to be. You used to, you know, you could stand your backyard stallion and they would get 50 mares, but now those stallions just don't get a look in with the commercial market. But I think it's very important to be. You've got to have looks as a stallion. I think that's imperative. You've got to have broodmare owners come to the property and see the horse, and that, you know, they've got to have a stallion that fills the eye. It's a little bit like when you buy yearlings. If you see a good-looking yearling, it doesn't matter what the pedigree page is. If you see something you really like in front of you, you then look down the pedigree page and go, oh, I can sell I can sell to myself that I want a winning Rupert, or I can sell myself that I want a Rich Enough. So if the stallion's good looking, like a yearling's good looking, you can sell yourself with, you know, the periphery, which might be, you know, the pedigree. So I would say have to have race performance. Looks are incredibly important, and then, I mean, who they're by is also important, as history shows. You know, Australian Speed, you know, works with, you know, Danehill and, you know, now Invincible Spirit and those sort of lines.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions that I had written down from our guests that are on tonight, a lot of them have been answered in there. So what I'll get to is the final brief for tonight of all of the viewers was to give myself some interesting facts or comments about James or Henry that we might not know. All right. So first one is that Henry was roommates with Ed Sackville. Ed, we had on the show last week. So you were roommates with him during the Godolphin Flying Start program. Is that right?
I was. How we both managed to get through the completion of the course as roommates is something that I can only be grateful to Joe and Clodagh, who run the course. Clodagh Kavanagh runs the course. But yeah, no, it's a great couple of years.
I had a couple more here. So Henry Field worked for Gay Waterfield when he was 14, which you mentioned earlier. I've got one here. Henry was involved in Justify, so I have that one. James worked at Inglis, which we knew from the intro. We also have one here. Billy Slater, rugby league legend, is at the moment his mare in Inishuwen is in foal to Wangina at Woodside Park. Is that correct?
He's in foal to Wangina, but is not at Woodside Park. Billy's actually set up his own property down east of Melbourne, a place called Berwick. So it's about sort of 45 minutes away. So he's been fencing that for the last sort of 12 months, and his mare is now there.
Yeah. One final question for both.
Talking about great sportsmen, Dave Warner has got a part of a foal that was just born at Newgate the other day. A deep field colt at a festivity, and I'll tell you what, it is an outstanding colt. Bruce Slade has a syndicate of people that bred the foal and own the mare, and Dave Warner's one of them. But gee, it's a good foal, so one to look forward to. Deep field festivity.
Speed and power, he's no stranger to. So on that note, Henry and James, will ask one question there. Who's the most famous person you've ever had dinner with?
Henry Field.
Nelson Mandela. No, I'm only joking. I'm not sure. Probably, I would say Sheikh Mohammed, who I was lucky enough to have dinner with on the Flying Start course.
And that's amazing. I've just posted another poll there, so it's just about future projects. So obviously with the mind, for people that are logged on, it gets the mind ticking over of what you could achieve or how you can get involved. And I guess, what would your advice be, Henry, to somebody that's on the webinars at the moment, maybe has a few small shares in, Tono and a few horses, but wants to get more heavily involved in the future? What would your advice to them be? So the first bit there is, would you be interested in one day investing in a stallion with a syndicate? The next one is just a few options there for ownership opportunities for projects. Then there's obviously, how would you like to get involved? But what would your advice be, Henry, to someone new getting into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, learn as much as you can. Get involved with good people. The stud that you invest in with is just as important as the stallion in which you're investing. So get to know the people well. Get to follow the track record of the studs and how to look after their partners. Very important. And just learn as much as you can about the business before you put your hard-earned cash into it.
And James, any advice for the newbies? And I guess you've sort of been involved in this webinar series since the start, so the line of questioning has definitely got a little bit more advanced since episode 1 or 2. So I guess what's your advice to those people that are constantly learning?
Oh, my advice is, if someone wants to get involved in this industry, a little bit along the lines of what Henry said, I think, this industry, yes, it's a business, but it's an incredibly enjoyable industry, and we're all in it because we've got a passion for horses, and so it's an incredibly enjoyable, entertaining industry. So I think building relationships is incredibly important. Be open, have integrity, be honest. If you're friendly and approachable, you're halfway there. People want to talk to you, and you will really pave the way. So I just say, be a thirst for knowledge, get to know as many people as possible, and if you're open and welcoming to people, they'll be the same back to you.
And I think that's the advice that a lot of us have got from everyone, is invest in the people rather than investing in the product at first. Obviously, you want good product, but you want to make sure that you're with good people. Just to sum up the summary there, we've got 86% of people would like to invest in a stallion, Henry. So I feel like, we'll get in touch and we'll probably buy the next deep field if you can let us know when there's one coming.
Well, I would say one thing. Anyone that's on the webinar, if they want to ever come to Newgate and have a look at the stallions, just touch them, feel them, see how it works. Just tell them to get in touch with us. We're open always to having people into the farm and seeing how our business runs. So don't be afraid to get in touch.
Yep, and then I've got the other polls there. We've got to get involved in ownership. They like the idea of multi-horse syndicates and with multiple trainers. They like the idea of doing as many projects as their money allows and being involved in different parts of it, buying broodmares. So I think diversity is probably what the webinar's throwing up there. And then the way they'd like to communicate is via Zoom meetings or short surveys that they can do at their leisure. So it's interesting, all of those types of things. And we've got a pretty good following. And next week, we turn our attention to how to become a trainer. So we've had trainers on before and we've talked about training techniques, but how do you become a trainer? So we've got Andrew Bobbin, who's Matt Kamani's assistant currently and about to start on his own in the Grampians, so Grampians Racing. I think it kicks off next week. Dennis Pagan already has a couple of runners and some success, and Annabelle Neesham kicked off her career last week with a debut winner, starting off as an assistant trainer to Kieran Ma. So I think there'll be 3 successful trainers there, and we'll hear about their paths next week. So finally, James, thank you again for coming on. So appreciate having you on here, and I know that you enjoyed listening to Henry as well, but it's really important for us to get a diverse amount of opinions, and you've definitely given us that over a few different webinars. And Henry, I think, at the absolute top of your game, and probably the most exciting person, I guess, in the industry at the moment to follow. So your story is incredible, and thanks very much for sharing your time with us.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to logging into watching the trainers next week. It'll be great. Thanks
very much. Thanks, guys, and thanks to all of our viewers. So good numbers again, and everything will be up on YouTube by tomorrow. Thanks again.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Corey.